So you have two possibilities of asking questions. So one is by just raising your hand now and posing questions, but also in Canvas there is a Zoom link, and you can click and access the call, and you can write your comments in the chat.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. You said that you didn't think that having like eco cities was a solution. For you, is having like 1,000 of little, million of little eco villages is a solution, or what do you think about?
Thank you. Thank you. It was a good question. I mean, I think what we're going to see is both an urbanization of rural areas, and we will see a ruralization of urban areas. We need to produce food in cities. We need to collect rainwater in cities. We need to try to create lifestyles in cities where you do not have to move yourself 50 kilometers inside the urban area. You need to live in your neighborhood. You need to try to solve your resource needs in your neighborhood, and thus we can have a renewal of cities. It's just simply logistically mind-boggling to think that nutrients, if we're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, need to be cycled. You cannot concentrate them. When you create a huge city, you concentrate these nutrients in the form of urban sewage that needs to get back to the farmer. And we have not developed any such systems. So that's why I don't really believe in scaling up the eco-village. It's the scale that is the solution, that people need to live on the soil as close as possible to where they are to meet their basic needs. There is still opportunity for trade and business, I mean, global trading, but we need to move less water molecules and less ions. If we're talking about energy, or don't move energy, don't move water, which means, spices, great, but don't move potatoes. Try to keep things as locally as possible. So I think there's a future for the city, but it's going to look much more rural, and there's a future for rural areas which is going to look much more like cities.
Interesting. Any other questions? Questions, comments? Yes. You can also really access the chat if you feel more comfortable with that. Maybe you should just, yep. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
I'll be looking there so I can see your face. But you mentioned that during the past 10,000 years, we've had this cultural values that allowed us to exploit the world and other people. And you mentioned how this needs to change. So my question is this change dependent on things like eco-villages existing, or can people go through this change differently in other ways?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very good question. I mean, this is the very core of it. It's culture that is the core of it. And it's very hard to change culture. It's very hard to make political decisions to change culture. Eco-villages are laboratories, experiments where we can make cultural change. And that's why it's so exciting to visit eco-villages, because you can actually experience a different culture. And so we try to get that culture going. You need a community to create culture. You could have a group of friends in the city. You're eating at each other's places. You're constantly together. You could create a different culture in the city, but it's difficult if you have to interact with a lot of other people who don't share your culture. So I think it's very difficult to shift culture. I think that's why it's also very difficult to shift politics, to accept the changes that are necessary. I'm a politician myself. I'm actually at the municipal hall right now, outside of a meeting of the regional council. Politicians don't want to change. There's a large resistance, and so this is really difficult to make new culture, and that's the challenge. And that's why I think eco-villages will be models of that new culture, and that can spread to other types of wider groups, looser networks, and we make maybe layers of different types of networks that create the new culture.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Let's remove this one. Does this work?
No, not so much, right?
It is connected to the mic, unfortunately. Sorry. But I saw that Julius is in the chat. There's someone else in the chat, so you can also write your question there. Yes.
Okay, so my question, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. There is in the global south this culture of consumerism, right? And from my point of view, people have to scale down a bit. Like you cannot buy 5 pairs of shoes every year and then put them in your storage and not use them anymore. Do you think this is even possible to accept for societies that they have to scale down from their standard of living?
Sorry, just clarification. Are you talking about the global south? So like
no, north.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
North.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thank you for the question. Yeah. I mean, it's quite clear that we have hyper consumerism, which I mean, studies show this does not bring happiness. That's what some of the work that I've done on subjective well-being. People do not feel richer, having more abundant lives because you have 50 different alternatives in the supermarket for a breakfast cereal. It doesn't make your life any better. In fact, they've actually shown that it makes your life worse because you have 50 different choices. You have to be in the shop figuring out which of that thing, which is the right product for you. And then you bring it home and then you actually maybe think, oh shit, I should have bought the other package. I don't like this one. So this overconsumption society does not bring us happiness. And this is what a lot of downshifters are discovering, that a voluntary simplicity within this huge mass consumption society, you can choose a life of voluntary simplicity where you say, no, I want to live simpler. You know, this complexity, the artificial complexity is not making me happy. The artificial complexity is also endangering us. So you can voluntarily choose to do something else and appreciate just the simple things in life and try to get back to something much more holistic and simple.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Yes. And then I also have a question for you, Robert. Yeah, please. Unfortunately, unless you want to join the chat, you have the link, so that's probably easier.
Hello.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask about eco-villages because I have this feeling that there's a risk that eco-villages become kind of elite in a way, that you have to either have a big amount of capital or that you are part of the cultural elite to become a part of an eco-village, not to become a part, but that it's, for example, Oroville, you have to volunteer for a year on your own expenses, and also I have this feeling in Denmark, like for Svenholm, for example, which is a Danish eco-village, that it's also somewhat a cultural elite is not the right word, but that there's not that much equality, like compared to the regular society. What's your thoughts upon that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the eco-village movement, thank you for that good question. I mean, it's just like any other part of society. And I said, every eco-village is different. So there are millionaire eco-villages, and there are eco-villages, many eco-villages that do not use any money at all, who welcome everyone who comes. So I would say that in Denmark, you're both lucky and unlucky that you have a lot of very well-developed, very, yeah, I would say very comfortable eco-villages. There are also, I know, in Denmark, the other types of eco-villages, which are very much about simplicity, that are not demanding huge amounts of money to get into them. So these also exist. So I think they both exist. There is definitely a bias. I would say it's more of an educational bias, that you'll find that you have more university graduates in eco-villages than you will find in the main population. So eco-villages tend to be sort of like UFOs in the countryside. Usually eco-villages are in the countryside where land is cheap. And then they tend to be a lot of urban, well-educated people that come to these places, which is actually a very good stimulus in the rural area. Resources are available, it's depopulated, people coming with new ideas, etc. It's quite good for the countryside. Yeah, it's definitely so. We do have a problem in the eco-village movement in Europe, that it's both hard to get a lot of working class people involved, and it's also hard to get people of color involved. And this just is connected, I think, to the privilege of education and maybe the privilege of making this choice. And yes, there is a connection with income levels, that people that feel financially secure are maybe more willing to make the choice to try a different lifestyle than people that feel financially insecure. But I mean, I know my own eco-village, there are people with no money arriving. That's also possible.